Now we are going to continue, and we are going to hear from an amazing person, Lisa Fiondella, Chief Customer Officer, Reconstruction Data. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
And Lisa is going to give us a quick presentation, and then we have a little conversation afterwards. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So
Glad to be here. Thank you. So I think I have control of this now. Yes, excellent. So as you heard, I'm Lisa Fiondella. I'm with reConstruction Data, which is an information services company in the commercial construction marketplace. We are owned by Reed Elsevier, which also owns companies such as LexisNexis and Reed Exhibitions. Now, what I'm going to do today is take you through a sales transformation journey that our organization has been conducting over the course of the last several years. And that journey really begins with a recognition by our CEO that we needed to create a culture of alignment within our business. And that alignment needed to exist not only within the functional areas of our business, but across every level of our organization. Now, our CEO, through a series of strategic exercises, along with our executive management team, and about 3 years ago this summer, made a decision to bring together the customer-facing functions within reConstruction Data. And the way they decided to do that was by hiring a Chief Customer Officer. Now, shortly thereafter, I showed up, and there were quite a few folks in the business who, as I was walking down the hall, would ask me a question about why I was there and what role I played in the organization. And I had to really explain to them that my job was to bring together all the customer-facing functions within the business: sales, customer support, account management, sales operations, and then in turn align those functions with the rest of the organization to ensure that we were maximizing the customer experience. Because at the end of the day, the customer is the most important part of our business, correct? So, as I started my journey with reConstruction Data, I faced quite a number of issues. And really, I break them down into 4 primary areas. The first revolved around a number of disconnected processes. And so let me talk to you a little bit about those disconnections. They really permeated the organization in a number of different ways, but primarily between marketing, sales, and customer management. And of course what I found was that everyone had their own agenda, we operated in silos, and there was really no alignment around various functions within the business. From my perspective, excuse me, microphone, that alignment was imperative to succeed, and imperative for us to really align against the customer experience. We had to have an agreed upon set of roles and goals, and we had to work collaboratively together to achieve this. Now, so this all sounds very nice, but at the end of the day, everyone knows it's very difficult. So let me talk to you about some of the primary things that I had to focus on as I started digging into this alignment that was necessary in the business. So let's start with marketing. One of the first challenges I faced was the fact that our marketing and sales organizations were not aligned. It was in some cases a combative relationship, and we did things in isolation. So the head of marketing and I came to an agreement that we would create a marketing to sales process. And what that marketing to sales process meant was that we would agree to collaborate. We pulled together a group of resources from both organizations, and we created a twice-monthly meeting where we sit down, yes, one more meeting on the agenda, but where we sit down and we talk about the relevant things that exist between marketing and sales, such as campaign management, a campaign that marketing created that we agreed to take to market. How is it performing? We talked about trade show execution. Oftentimes marketing works on trade shows in isolation, and you don't align the sales execution with the trade show planning. We talk about those things. And the one area that we talk about that is probably the hottest button for me is lead generation. How do we take and find qualified high quality leads in the marketplace that we can feed to our sales channel. So we're relative novices in this marketing to sales process, but so far it's working pretty well. But the other thing that, that was really important to me was, as I mentioned before, lead generation. Let me give you a sense of how lead generation happened in our business. If I go back about 4 years ago, really lead generation was the sales representative searching the web, maybe looking in some databases that we had in our business. And yes, we're in commercial construction, so as you're driving to work in the morning, there might be Joe's painting truck next to you. You jot down the phone number and call him in the afternoon. That was lead generation. In late 2007, our marketing department began leveraging the web, and we started introducing SEO and SEM, and I might say today I think we're quite good at that. But when we started that process, what happened was the leads would come in through the channel, and then they would sort of go over the fence into the sales arena, never to be heard from again. There was no real back-end management of them, no agreement to nurture leads and potentially drive greater close rates with the leads we were generating through the channel. So through this marketing to sales process that we've created, we've now got a much more rigorous evaluation of our SEO and SEM activities, and we're really looking at how we drive collaborative efforts to improve close rates. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, and it's been a very good situation. Now, from there, where does that lead us? Well, while the SEO and SEM activities did generate some growth for our business, it largely replaced a lot of the old behaviors that went on in the organization, the sales-generated leads. So while it was great to get a more productive lead set into the business, it's also an area that we need to continue to focus. So we really are stretching ourselves by focusing on other external types of lead sources, as well as nurturing programs that will help drive the quality of the leads. So now that marketing and sales are somewhat aligned, because as I said, it's always a journey, let's talk a little bit about the sales process and some of the challenges that I faced there. In my sales organization, I have really 7 different sales roles. And when I sit down and look at the roles that exist in the organization, I have decisions I need to make about how to use them most effectively in the marketplace. Because at the end of the day, productivity matters. So we had a very traditional legacy type outside sales, inside sales culture and environment. And there were some lines drawn in the sand around when you would go, when an outside salesperson would get involved and when an inside salesperson would get involved. But I realized that there was an awful lot of time being spent by people in the sales organization focused on who owned the account relationship. And that was consuming entirely too much of our energy, because in fact that energy could be placed into the marketplace in an attempt to be more successful. And so we've been undertaking a journey, and we're still in the midst of this, of really looking at how we take those 7 roles, maybe we really only need 5, 4 or 5, and how we align those against the various types of organizations in our marketplace who buy our products and services. Another primary area for me is obviously pipeline management and forecasting. And I have to tell you, when I first joined the company, forecasting was a bit scary, because the first thing I noticed was that all of our forecasting was done based on historical information and virtually no pipeline data. And we'll talk in a moment about technology and tools, but there was a very limited data available to the business in this particular area. So we've really had to look at how we gather pipeline information. And one of the things I noticed was that we didn't use a sales process. Now, I realize that may seem simple, but at the end of the day, if everybody is operating according to a very basic sales process, then everybody's talking about the same thing. When you talk about needs analysis as one of the stages in the sales process, then if everybody understands what the definition of that means, then you can all create a common recognition of pipeline opportunities in the needs analysis stage. So we rolled out a very basic sales process. And now, guess what? We have pipeline information. We're also in the process of making sure that everyone in the organization knows and understands the definitions of that 5-stage sales process. Now, our forecasting is not perfect. It's getting better. We'll continue to improve it. But consistency matters when it comes to forecasting. We're going to talk more about people in a little bit, but I have to mention one of the other dynamics in the sales arena. And in the discussion that was just held a moment ago, they were talking a little bit about training and coaching. I'm a big proponent of people development. We invest a lot in our people, and it's imperative that we make sure that we not only bring them in correctly, but that we help them evolve through the organization, or we help them out the door if that's the right answer. I know that sounds really crude, but at the end of the day, it's very important that we focus on training and development. When I joined the organization, we had an onboarding process for our inside sales arena. Basically came in, you were in a 2-week class. You then went into an incubator for about 5 months where you got some coaching and attention, and then you were thrown to the wolves. And you did one of 2 things. You either swam away and you swam the ocean, or you drowned. And our churn rate was very high in the inside sales organization in particular. So we have actually hired a training manager. We are developing, and I'll talk a little bit more about our value-based selling program in a moment, but we've developed a training program, and that training program will be administered by our management team so they can use it for performance management. So now that we've aligned marketing and sales, I have to tell you, it's interesting in the companies I've looked at before, and in some of the ones I've experienced in my own career, how often we limit our investment in the customer management cycle. And so quite frankly, from my standpoint, this is probably one of the areas that gets overlooked quite often, and is one of the areas where we really should focus a lot of attention. From a customer management standpoint, in my world, that means from the time we sign the contract until the time the customer leaves our organization, that's our customer management life cycle. And actually my customer relations manager is in the room today. I've tasked him to really analyze that process from the contract signing through onboarding, through the first year of their subscription, through the renewal process, so we understand the dynamics of the customer management cycle. And I have to tell you, this area, from my standpoint, is often, there's a lack of investment in some cases. So like many organizations, we really have to try and maximize the dollars we have available in this space. But we also have to use this part of the life cycle to understand the customer experience. And this is where voice of the customer comes in. Everything from how often they call you and why they're calling, to how long it took them to onboard, to how they're using your product or service, to the experience that occurs when they renew their subscription. Was it an early renewal, a late renewal? All the different dynamics that go around that customer management process, in my mind, are critical when it comes to understanding the experience of the customer. So, we've taken a lot of steps to aligning our marketing, sales, and service functions, but we have a problem, and that problem is technology and tools. And I have to tell you, we're very fortunate at Reed Construction Data because our parent company, Reed Elsevier, made a decision to invest in technology for us about 2 years ago, and we've had the opportunity to literally replace every piece of infrastructure we have, whether it's our phone system, which was very antiquated, our CRM, our billing and financial system, even our email servers have all been replaced. Now, with that comes a lot of work and, quite frankly, a lot of pain, and it's caused us to have to really evaluate every single business process that we run. So let me give you an example of an antiquated business process. Many of you, I heard a snicker, so somebody's been through this before. We have prospects we call on the phone, and we're talking to them, and We give them a username and password to trial our service, and we really hope that they're going to prove the value of our product to themselves, so they'll then buy our service. Now, I have to tell you, obviously, this is not the best way to conduct business, and for us, this is the way we did it for a long time. One day, I was walking through our inside sales floor and happened to bump into one of our reps who was very excited. He was standing in his cube, and he was looking at his screen, and he was really excited about this new tool he'd found, and it was called Glance. And he was telling me how it was going to transform his sales process and make him more efficient and more successful, and he was going to subscribe to it by himself, even if the company didn't on his behalf. And so our management team took a look at that tool and found that, yes, in fact, we could create a great deal of value for the business by introducing a new demonstration method. Number one, we're no longer trialing our data like we used to. Number two, we're directing the demonstration process. We have almost 100% adoption of this tool, and it really, truly has transformed that selling process. Now, I mentioned that we had the opportunity to really replace most of our infrastructure, or all of our infrastructure. So let me tell you a little bit about that. We hired a company by the name of Blue Wolf to do our Salesforce.com implementation. They brought with them some resources that helped us understand our business processes so we could see what was working and what wasn't, how we were going to map those into our new systems, and then how we were going to transform them. We made two really important decisions when we launched Salesforce.com. One of those was that we had really three lines of business that operated between Canada and the US that generally operate in the same marketplace. We made a decision that we were going to create one system, that all the records from all three businesses were going to coexist in this one system. It was a very difficult exercise, and some of the business rules that went along with that were very challenging. The second decision we made was that this was going to be our system of record. Now, we talk a lot about Customer 360, and I don't believe that that's really necessarily possible, but we've gotten darn close to creating the right system of record with as much information as we need to manage that customer experience. After launching Salesforce.com, we integrated Glance into the system. We now have access to all the Glance metrics within Salesforce.com. And Glance, making us much more efficient in the demo area, also enabled us to really understand what was going on when we demonstrated our product or service. So how long do demos typically take? Who's doing the most demos in the organization? Mapping that to their sales performance and really trying to understand the drivers of success. Oops. Are you taking care of that problem? Okay, good, thank you. Additionally, we've recently adopted D&B's new Data as a Service tool, D&B 360, which is playing an instrumental and a very important part in the data management within our CRM. It's also going to be driving a lot of our lead gen activities, and we've also recently signed on with Eloqua. So let's talk a little bit about probably the hardest part of any transformation, and that's the people. Now, when I joined Reed, I found what many people probably would expect, that I had a very siloed organization just within the sales function. So there was no way for the sales function to actually align with the rest of the business because it was so siloed. No one ever actually even spoke to each other. Lots of passive-aggressive behavior. Definitely no goal alignment. And that was obviously, from my standpoint, a very critical problem. So we had to create alignment, and it was very difficult. And we're still going through that process today, but it meant some very difficult decisions around leadership changes that were necessary, creating the right financial incentives to ensure that people were actually aligned and the behaviors were reinforcing the strategy that we had in place. And the third piece really is around training, as I mentioned before. There's two pieces to this. One is understanding the competencies that you require in order to be successful, and understanding where you have those competencies in the organization and where you don't, and making decisions to fix that problem. And we are currently in the process of that competency analysis or competency assessment and rolling out what we call value-based selling program. And we've actually taken this program, we've aligned it with the business processes in our sales function, and this program will be rolled out this year to our inside sales and customer relations functions. It's actually in their KPOs, so they've got to get it done this year. And the most important part of this is that it's not administered by our training manager. Yes, we have one, and she does a great job, and she helped us build this program. But at the end of the day, it's not her job to administer this program. It's the manager's responsibility. They will be trained on the program. They will be responsible for rolling it out and training their teams with the help of our training manager. And then they will be responsible for performance managing each individual in the organization against the competencies within this program. And finally, let's talk a little bit about metrics. So my first few days at Reed were a little scary because I had a very difficult time finding the answers to the questions I had. For example, I mean, it was easy to understand how much revenue we were generating, but when it got right down to the details of the metrics, I often got different answers to the same question, and that was very concerning. Today, with all the new tools and technology we have, we're on information overload. We have more data than we know what to do with. And that's a great problem to have, right? I'd rather have that than the other problem, believe me. But now the exercise that we've had to undertake is really taking a look at those metrics, or that data, and creating the right metrics for the business. Now, we recently went through a very painful one-day exercise with the management team where we sat down and talked about the very important pieces of information that we must measure within our business. And we did that by asking ourselves the question, what question we needed to evaluate, what data source we were going to use to get it, how often we were going to look at it, and what it told us about the business. I can tell you that through the rollout of all the tools that we have, we've pushed this information all the way up the chain. And the CEO in our organization has his own set of dashboards in Salesforce.com. He looks at information on a regular basis, actually looks at it every morning, because I usually get a phone call. And you know, I can, oops, it just logged me out, but I can go onto Salesforce and tell you where my inside sales team and outside sales team stand right now. So it's a nice problem to have. The other thing about metrics, and I have to tell you, it was, sometimes I think we lose sight of whether we're measuring the people or the process. You have to measure both. And we learned very quickly that, yeah, you know, I measure my inside sales leader on how he's doing from an invoicing or a revenue standpoint. But at the end of the day, you have to measure both the people and the processes that exist around them. So in summary, I guess there's really an old saying in the construction industry, which I think applies pretty closely to the business, the journey that we're on. You know, we've come a long way in a very short period of time. I didn't tell you that transformation, all that technology process was an 18-month process. It's amazing some of us are actually still standing, but we really believe that, you know, there's a lot of things that happen in your business on a day-to-day basis, and you have to make decisions about those things as you go through the process. But what's really important is making sure we focus our attention on the big decisions, on the important decisions. Really analyze the data that you have. Don't get mired down in the analysis process, and make decisions and move. And that's really the culture we've tried to develop and adopt at Reed Construction Data. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello. How are you? I'm doing great.
Can we sit down and have a little chat?
Okay.
We have about 6 minutes and 28 seconds, and
okay.
I want to use
22 now.
Right. I want to use that time constructively.
Okay.
I was very impressed when I visited with you in Atlanta. And I was impressed first with your title, Customer Success Manager, and with the vision of your CEO. And you have achieved a transformation where you looked at about, what, 30 different processes and created a map for improvement. And you started with a big checkbook and a lot of dreams. What were the moments of despair?
Oh boy, you know, quite frankly, we tried to do a lot of things at once. And I think in retrospect, and one of the individuals who participated in this is sitting in the audience as well, he probably would agree with this point, that we took on a lot, and it caused us to really have to move very quickly through some decisions we probably would have wanted to have more time with. And for example, in our inside sales area, we had this really interesting thing, and I know we've got 5 minutes, so I'll make this quick, but where our inside sales reps could hoard 999 leads and in their database. And if they brought a new one in, one fell out the bottom, but that was their pipe, I don't know what it was, their lead pool. And when we rolled out Salesforce.com, we made some very difficult decisions. Number one, we forced on them a sales cycle. Now, our sales cycle on average is about 14 days. We've learned that since we rolled out all the tools. But we gave them 13 weeks. We said, you can have 13 weeks to close what's in your pipeline, but you must move them through the pipeline, through the sales process, excuse me. And the other thing is when you get to the end, if you have somebody you really feel like you need to hang on to, we'll give you a couple of hundred of those. Now, our plan over time is to shorten that 13 weeks and whittle the 200 down. But that was our first stab at it. And as we got into it, we realized that there were some things that we did incorrectly with the process, and we would have rather had not have done it that way. And so, you know, it creates, when you've got 100 salespeople on the floor, it creates a little friction, and you have to go back and tell them why you made the mistake and start all over again. So there were a number of moments like that where we wish we hadn't made a decision and had. If I
remember correctly, you used an outside company to implement Salesforce.com for you.
Right, Blue Wolf, yes.
And it cost you what? How much?
A lot.
A lot.
Several million, yes.
Several $1 million.
Yes, yes.
And then you were ready to roll out, and what happened?
Ah, you remember my story about that, yeah. Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. Well, we were supposed to go live on October 4th, 2010, and the implementation failed. And it failed largely because our data migration failed. And that's what everybody would expect, right? We literally just ran out of time, and we should have pulled the implementation back, but we tried to go live anyway. And about halfway through Monday, October 4th, we reverted to our old antiquated CRM. And it took us about another 2 weeks, but we got it right. And the reason it was so hard, that was the decision to take 3 businesses and combine the data. And it was extremely painful.
And how did you recover?
By admitting we made a mistake. You know,
you know. And how would you describe the mistake, and how can people learn from that mistake?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think the approach I've always taken, no matter what I do, is I just tell people straight honestly what happened. And at the end of the day, we were halfway through the day. The sales team was frustrated. We hadn't booked anything for the day. And it was the beginning of the month. We were trying to get off a good start, and we realized that we had trained the reps the week before, but we recognized that if we were going to delay, we were going to have another training issue we had to face. So just from a learning standpoint, I would tell you that the 2 things were, once we realized we had a problem and we needed to revert back to the old CRM, then we needed to make that decision and execute it quickly. And the second piece was we needed to be honest with everybody about what had happened.
So what was the call like to your boss?
Well, he'd been sort of living this thing with us, so he was not surprised, but I mean, disappointed, but not utterly surprised. Listen, our first October 4th marked 16 weeks for us from the time we actually started the development on that implementation till we actually went live. And I thought that was pretty quick.
Right. So you recovered, but you lost a day's worth of sales.
Yes.
And some pride.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Right. You want to be perfect.
Of course.
Right. Right. And what would you do differently? You have to roll time back and say, now I have more information than before. What is the one step that everybody should think about before they embark on their journey? And was it more a process issue? You know, people have integrated a million times 2 or 3 databases. So
right.
That wasn't a surprise. What was the surprise?
Well, I mean, the problem was we ran out of time. So I think what we should have done, probably a week, we still would have trained the team because things were moving along well at that point. Right. But it was probably within a few days after that we realized we had a problem. So we should have pulled the plug at that time and just and adjusted our schedule. So that would have been the decision to make, quite frankly.
I have one more question that intrigues me because you put a number of applications on top of Salesforce.com, and theoretically you could have 1,175 applications, but you chose only a few. What would be a good way to approach the question, what is the ideal ecosystem of applications that I want and need in order to maximize productivity?
Okay, so I think from my I think you really have to focus on the things that are going to drive the greatest, obviously the greatest efficiency in the process. And so I would prioritize those applications that drove that improvement. For example, we are looking today at electronic signature for our contracting process. And I think going back in time, if we'd had more time to really analyze each of the historical processes and create our benchmarks about, okay, our contracting process is 22% of our sales reps' time, and here's the dysfunction in it, and here's what we can gain by moving to some sort of 2.0 type application, and prioritizing those. We probably would have made maybe a few different decisions in our approach. But at the end of the day, that's the approach I would take, is really look at each of those steps and what drives the greatest opportunity for improvement. And
there's an app for that.
There is an app for that. Thank you.
I'm working on it.
Okay, are you?
Yeah.
Well, let me know about it when you,
when
you got it.
I will.
Glad to take a look at, we'll look at just about anything.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Besides electronic signature, what do you think is going to drive your business further forward?
Very aggressive lead generation.
Okay.
And that is our primary focus,
right.
is looking at external data sources, new ways of managing leads, nurturing leads. We're having a big debate about lead nurturing right now and what that exactly means. But we are moving down that path, and anything that we can do. Listen, we're in an interesting situation. Our market is enormous. There are more companies out there that could buy our data and our products than we could probably ever touch. So we're very fortunate in that regard. But at the same time, we want to be very efficient in how we go to market. So lead generation.
Now, and you deliver the data electronically, and in the past you still use print, and I saw in your office a whole pile of journals.
Yeah.
Are they going to go away altogether? Or?
Oh, John, what do you think about that? Actually, it's interesting. So my background is information services, and actually all the people in the executive management group at Reed are from an information services background. But we're part of a company that has a legacy in publishing. And so we do have a lot of print product in our business. In our core business, it's about 1% of our current sales. It's probably about 20% of our business. A larger percentage of our customers. but it's moving away quite quickly. In other parts of our business, like in our cost estimating business, it's a large part of the business, and I'm not quite sure. I think we need to...
Would it be possible to deliver this on an iPad?
Absolutely, yes. And
with the cost of your subscription, you could actually give them the iPad free.
Wow, that's one of our sales reps came up with that idea the other day.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, we have a mobile app that we've developed, and we've got it in beta right now, so we're anxious to see if it's going to gain some adoption. Primarily in the contractor segment. You know, contractors are in their trucks most of the day, and that's why they like our print bulletin.
Right.
But a lot of them are moving to mobile, so hopefully they'll adopt quickly.
And how do you see the use of video in lead generation?
Video?
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that one.
Well, let's start.
Okay. How do you see it?
I see that you get a lot more opens if you add a link to a video than you just send an email with good data and good information.
Right.
And there's interactive video. There's a company called Veeple, V-E-E-P-L-E. It's a very strange name, Veeple.com. And Chris Cabrera was speaking this afternoon. He has recorded 1-minute videos that has links embedded where, for example, he talks about incentive compensation. You don't know what it is. You can stop the video and click on a link, and then you get directly to a video where it explains in 1 minute what the subject is all about. Or you can go to a website. So now video is going from linear to interactive and dynamic. So I could, I mean, you could create a video that's 2 minutes in length and talks about construction data and has links to, let's say 6 links, and behind that 1 minute or 2 minute video is another 12 minutes of video that go into detail if you want to drill down. Yeah,
well actually I think that's an interesting idea too, in particular for our cost estimating business, because we have a brand, RS Means, which is really kind of it's got a great reputation in the marketplace. It's the industry leader, and a large part of our customer base is built through the educational channel, so students coming up through engineering schools and architecture schools and so forth. And they'd probably be a great market to consume something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can, in a 1 minute video, you can say more than what you can say in a 1,200 word blog or white paper.
Right. I like that idea.
Good. I'm glad. I think we're making progress. Give Lisa a big hand. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
your expertise.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.